affect students, how, if schools decide to no longer fund staff positions as requested by the district, what will happen to those positions? I guess that is if school PTAs decide to no longer fund that staff positions. What would potential funding sources be other than PTA fundraising efforts? People asking what's the current gap for next year's budget, and is there a framework and or principles for deciding what budgets will not be touched? Which ones might be reduced and which ones will be cut? Please explain. And who can provide Prop 28 guidance? Many PTAs fronted for arts programming with a promise of reimbursement.
Yes, thank you for the question. So first of all, good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me. Yeah, those are a lot of questions. Just a few ones that Rita listed just now around budget can be an entire, half a day worth of conversation. And so I appreciate one, that you listed all the questions out, and want to let you know that any that I'm not able to answer in our brief time together, we'll make sure that we respond to in that same document that you sent and get it back to you. I also want to say, I noticed that at first it was like 15 questions, and then I looked, I'm like, wait, now there's 22. So I know there was some additional ones that were added just this evening that we weren't able to respond to. But again, I'll get you all the answers soon after our meeting tonight, for sure, sometime this week. But I do appreciate that we're actually focusing more on the budget, not only because those were the questions that came up the most, but also I just think it's an important kind of area of our work that we want to make sure that everybody kind of understands. So I will try to answer all those questions, but want to kind of backtrack just to name and say that we had to make some key budget decisions, because when we received the governor's budget, we were not getting the same amount of revenue, if you will, that we had typically gotten in previous years. So our need to think about some budget reductions or budget balancing strategies was a direct response to the governor's budget, which let us know that we were going to be getting significantly less money than we had in years prior. I mean, essentially, just to oversimplify it, we know that during the days and times of COVID, there was a lot of additional resource and support sent to schools and school districts, and that now the governor and the government is in this process of kind of balancing their own budget, if you will. And the result of that is that there's still a prioritization of schools, but that prioritization looks like not cutting existing or previously traditionally existing funds, but also not giving those extra funds that had been given during the time of COVID and the pandemic. So as a result of that, and as a result of, quite honestly, our district, in our attempt to, serve and do a lot, was deficit spending. So both to correct and address the deficit spending that we were doing to the tune of about $0.6 million, and to address the dollars coming in from the governor, we had to really decide and just be honest about the fact that we are very much moving into a year 24-25, and then also 25-26, that we're going to have to do some budget reductions. We're calling it budget balancing. And so with that, thinking about all of the monies that we have coming in, but also thinking about the programs, the people, and the things that we are doing, our expenses, for lack of a better term, even beyond those programs and the people, we set a target to do budget reductions totaling $9.7 million across the 24-25 school year and the 25-26 school year. So $9.7 million total, including 25-26, with the first set of cuts or reductions, if you will, being for the 24-25 school year to the tune of $7.1 million. I want to be really clear that 7.1 million, again, is just for 24-25. We know that ultimately we need 9.7 ongoing. What we did also is we made it clear that is the target now, based on current expenses and based on anticipated revenue. We do understand that there might be additional and required expenses going forward that might impact that 7.1. But for now, I want you all to hear and know that our number for 24-25 is 7.1 million. We started sharing that target with a group that we call Superintendent's Budget Advisory Committee that Rita is on, and some other folks on this call are on. Vicky, I see Vicky here, and Lindsay, and really started to kind of think about, like, first just to process and digest, because the number 7.1 million is a big number for anyone, but it's particularly big number for a small district like ours, and probably one of the biggest reductions that we've had to make in some years. And so it's really new to us as a system and district. What we shared with the committee, and what I will share with you, and I also will link this, Rita, to the question and answer sheet, is that we wanted to be really intentional about how we go about moving towards that $7.1 million target. And what we did and what we are doing is by implementing, a number of strategies that we're calling our budget reduction strategies. I'm going to see, friends, if I could share my screen. Can you all see that? Oh, perfect. And so what you see here are the budget reduction strategies that we've been implementing to move towards that 7.1 million. I want to name that these are not in a specific order, though they do kind of speak to kind of the chunks or the phases of the strategies that we've been going through as a team and as the staff. The first one being evaluating and removing vacant positions. So we know that we had a number of vacant positions in our district and wanted to see what kind of cost savings we could get from that, which of course would not impact people or programs. Then we go through chewing up costs. We look at how we can eliminate expenses that could be covered in other funding sources. I guess what I should have said, and I apologize, is that $7.1 million target for 24-25 is just coming out of our unrestricted general fund. I'm happy to share with you at a later date or send to you all a visual that just makes it clear that district funding is made up of a number of different funding sources. Some restricted, that comes with, you have to use it for this population or in this way. Some that are term, which means that you get the funding for 3 years or 1 year, and then some that are open and ongoing, depending on attendance, for example, that you have discretion with. What we're focusing on right now is just the unrestricted general funds. And so we're looking at what expenses do we currently have on that funding source that we may be able to move to a different funding source. We're also looking at, I hate to say this as an educator, sometimes we leave money on the table. Sometimes there are examples where maybe a department or a team or even a program or project was allocated a certain amount of money and all of that money wasn't spent. So sweeping back, if you will, and looking at where we've not spent funds is another strategy that we employ. We also look at our various programs and our positions, and we look for inefficiencies. We look for where are there duplications of effort, and see if we actually need to have 5 programs that do the same thing versus really focusing our dollars and thinking about the 3 that are the most impactful and really allocating resources there. We also are looking at transferring expenses to other funding sources. And then the very last thing that we engage in is thinking about where, if we need to consolidate and reduce people and programs, positions and program. But I said people because I know that this is very much a people business. And the first thing that a lot of folks think about when you talk about budget balancing or budget reduction is like oh my gosh, we're going to get rid of, right? And so I really wanted to show you this list to see that I, in partnership with our Superintendent's Budget Advisory Committee, in partnership with our board and our executive cabinet staff, really focus on those first 6 before ever getting to that number 7, which is consolidate and reduce positions and programs. We actually have been going through this process, and Vicky, Lindsay, whoever can chime in if I misspeak or forget to say something, over the last, I'd say about 2 months, like really intently. And what's exciting about that is that in partnership with members of our SBAC, we were actually able to identify about $6.9 million towards that $7.1 million target that just focused on those first 6 reduction strategies that haven't even gotten us to looking at positions and programming. Now, I expected to see the little fireworks and stuff come on the screen, but I didn't see them. But let me just tell y'all, that is a huge lift. That's a big deal to make so much progress towards, a pretty, significant target without yet thinking about or touching programs and positions. I do want to also stress, though, before you put the confetti up, that $6.9 million, some of that is one time, which means that, again, because our ultimate target is 9.7 ongoing, next year, whatever amount of that 6.9 was a one-time kind of savings, if you will, we will have to make that up again. So it is good and it's progress, but we know there's a lot of work to do. I'm going to pause there to see if anyone has any questions.
When you just said that about how, this is, some of those is one-time spending, we also don't really know what next year's budget from the state will look like, right? Like that changes every year.
Right. So there is, so we get the governor's budget, which is kind of preliminary, right? It's like, this is, what he's thinking based on what's going on. And then there's something that's called the May revise. And May is really when we get, okay, here's what it really is going to look like. And then we make modifications or adjustments accordingly. We've made that we've identified that 6.9 million towards the 7.1, right? And we know, again, we have more that we need to look at. We're really hoping that come May, the governor's like, just kidding, you actually are going to get more, and then we'll make that adjustment accordingly. So thank you for that question, Rita. I see a question for Dorit. Did I say your name right? You're muted, my friend.
Could you give us more specifically which programs you're thinking of cutting? I know you've been working on this for many weeks now, and it's a big job. So what programs are you thinking of cutting?
So if we get there, we honestly, Mr. Ray, have not gotten to like, oh, which programs are we cutting? I can tell you that one of the conversations that the committee has been engaged in, or at least over the past 2 meetings, is really looking at, again, programs where it seems, at least by looking at the program on paper, is replicating or duplicating efforts. And so the focus has really been that we have a number of programs that are really in service of getting our students to college. For example, there's a number of programs that say that they're about college readiness, or getting our students to college. And we think that's important, and we want to support that. But the committee has been looking at these programs to see if, one, are they all doing what they say that they're supposed to do? Are they getting the impact, if you will, that we expect? Are they serving the number of students that we need them to serve? And is there a way for us to be that much more efficient just with those? I think there was about 5 of them that the team looked at. Again, all of them are important, but some of them, for example, are contracted, let's say, or the program itself is supposed to serve 100 students, and maybe it's only really consistently serving 30. And so it might not be that we get rid of that program, but it might be that we think differently about going into the contract for the next year and say, instead of paying you for 100 students, we'll pay you and make your contract for 30. And so again, I want to be really clear that, and thank you for bringing that up, that the last line says consolidate and reduce. We didn't necessarily say get rid of programs. And so when we're evaluating programs and for inefficiencies, et cetera, we're looking at, there might be a chance that the program we stop doing, but we're really first looking at how can we really maximize efficiency. So that's one set of programs that we've been looking at, but there haven't been many others yet. Again, I think we made a lot of progress towards that 7.1 without touching programs and positions. And so now that's where the conversation is looking at programs and looking at positions. So I can definitely come back with an update for the committee as we start to really engage in those. But we've only been looking at college preparation programs at this point. Rita?
We've got it. So I know we don't get you for much longer, but we do have a couple notes in the chat or questions in the chat. One is the board meeting minutes looked like a lot of aides and support staff were cut. Was that template based? And the other question is how much of the 6.9 is ongoing versus one time?
Okay, and now I don't know what happened to my screen. I stopped sharing and now I can't find anything. So how much of it is one time? I will find that and give you the exact number, because I don't want to, of that 6.9, I think it was about 5 of it is ongoing, and there was closer to like that smaller number, but I'll get you that exact number in just a second when I figure out what's going on my computer. You mentioned the board meeting minutes. Say that again.
Lindsay, you're the commenter here. Do you want to say anything more about that? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I meant the agenda. It was me mistyping. But so in the consent calendar for on Wednesday, there's a lot of, it looks like kind of across the board, 1 aide and some school support staff were cut down to, like, if they were 0.56, they're now a 0.2 or 0.02, like that kind of thing, like effectively zeroing it out. And I was wondering if that was like kind of support staff template based, or where that was coming from and how it would affect our schools.
Without looking at exactly what you're looking at, Ms. Lindsay, I don't want to misspeak. Can I circle back with you on that question? Just because I'm not looking at it. And I don't know what exactly was posted. What I can say is that there are 2 versions, which is why I want to not misspeak. One of the things that we are aware of is that for us to cover some of the expenses, not in our unrestricted general fund, but in our LCFF supplemental funding, that we are asking, there's a little gap there, and we're asking the board to approve for us to get some money out of a reserve that we have, and that would prevent us from having to then, use money from the general fund to address that gap. And so there is a set of positions that are potentially going to be reduced, but they're pending that decision, and that decision is the board's going to make the same night. So if that decision is made, there's a set of positions that are going to be presented. If it's not approved, there's a different set. So again, without looking at or knowing which set you're looking at, I don't want to misspeak, but I can definitely circle back to you. Our hope, though, is that even if a person gets the layoff notice, and the list has actually reduced significantly since the initial list. I think, Lizzie, you had the first set of numbers as well as the SBAC. We hope to continue to be able to rescind layoffs and reduce the number of impacted employees even after tomorrow's board meeting. And I see you put in the link. I will look at it, Lindsay.
Yeah, it's a 14.2.
Okay, let me look at it and let me send you all a response.
We have a couple of hands up, and then of the questions that I had read off earlier, I think you've talked about all but the Prop 28, and I think people are of our notes here. Well, no, there's 2. Prop 28 and if schools decide not to fund staff positions, what happens? Or not schools, that's wrong. If PTAs decide not to fund staff positions, which I think I've mentioned this elsewhere, but that's something that when I worked with the PTA Peralta district auditor, she was discouraging PTAs from funding staff positions. So that's not sort of out of the blue. That's something that's like being messaged towards us as well.
Yeah, no, it's not out of the blue at all. And quite honestly, it's actually typical and in some ways best practice, right? One of the things that we shared with our SBAC, our Budget Advisory Committee, are some core values of resource allocation. And one of those values is around sustainability and stability, that you allocate resources and even think about positions and programs for the long haul, and not like we get funded today, but tomorrow we don't know. And so just by that, with that value, Ms. Rita, PTA funding for positions that are considered like important or kind of foundational positions is not a good philosophy. What we know is that one, we appreciate the support that we've received from our PTAs across the years. The core values for resource allocation, and even us just getting more clear about what we're spending our monies on, and kind of evaluating the impact of these things is a newer muscle that we're building in BUSD. And so we started to build this muscle around the general funds. We know that our next frontier, if you will, is to think about those supplemental funds, and PTA can be considered something supplemental, and figure out how to make sure the use of those funds is aligned to these core values of resource allocation as well. It's conversations that we've been having, but have not yet, formalized any type of communication or set of expectations. But I can say to you that I totally agree that it is not best practice for PTAs to be funding. At the same time, as we look at a $7.1 million budget cut, we again really appreciate that we have PTAs that can help support. I think just before I'll leave this one alone, but one of our core values of resource allocation is equity. And one thing that I know that is real about relying on PTAs to fund positions that we really feel are essential for our students is that it creates inequities. And inevitably, some schools raise more, can do more than other schools. So at the very least, what we want to do is have a conversation around not just clear expectations of how our PTA dollars are used, but also really bringing all the PTAs in the room and in the same space to figure out, like, how do we make sure that we're making these decisions in ways that are equitable. The question was, if PTAs no longer fund some of the positions that are listed and I'm speaking without looking at what's posted on our board docs, I'm sorry, on Gamut, are just that, our PTA positions or positions that are funded with PTA that we're not yet for sure will be funded. And so that is why some of those people might be getting that may have gotten that March 15th notice and may actually get an official May notice because we're waiting to hear if the funding is secure. But that is one of the consequences of relying on PTA funding. And I think we will work with every site to understand and have been already what those positions are, if those positions will be funded so that, again, we can rescind them if possible. Oh, there's lots of hands. I'm gonna let you down, Miss Rita.
Okay, Vicky, I think you're first, then Tatiana, and then Dorit.
Yeah,
Vicky
I was.
did not ask any questions. Vicky should be presenting with me right now. And
I
Lindsay,
am actually. I
thank
was
you, Ms.
going to say, based on the board slides from April 24th, the total recommended cuts was 6.9, and of that, 4.7 was ongoing and 2.1 was one-time funding.
Rock on, Vicky.
Vicky is a member of SBAC, so you know. I'm not gonna call any other names, but please chime in to help me fill gaps. I appreciate that though, Vicky.
Vicky, could you repeat that and go slower?
Yes, so far their recommendation was for 6.9 million in cuts. 4.7 of those cuts are ongoing and 2.1 are one-time cuts or savings.
Thank you.
What I know, first of all, I appreciate all y'all's time. This is volunteer time. I get it. And what I will do when I'm off this call is to send the link to our Superintendent Budget Advisory webpage. Not that you want to watch an entire meeting, but all of our meetings are recorded and all of the artifacts or decks for those meetings are there. And I'll both send you the most recent deck where it's kind of summarized what reduction strategies we've gone with and which ones the board approved, as well as just make sure you know how you can see those meetings and how you can even participate and attend those meetings going forward. Hi, Tatiana.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm hanging in there.
Hang in. What you got for me?
Funds for legal settlements and compensatory ed, things like that. Where do those come from?
Say more. What are you looking at?
For example, when families get settlements for NPS placements or settlements for unilateral private placements, compensatory ed for failure to provide services through an IEP, for example. Where do those funds come from?
Yeah, some, but not all of those funds come from general fund. One of the things, and I wrote your question down because I want to bring it, it wasn't on the list, but I will add it to the list and give you a more detailed answer because I don't want to misspeak, but I do know that some of those funds, some of those settlements, if you will, are coming out of general fund. And one of the things that we shared with SBAC was a list of our legal fees, specifically looking at those that come out of Fund 0001, I believe. And so we call it out. So I will share that with the committee so you can see, but that is not inclusive, Tatiana, of all of the kind of sped, if you will, settlements and how that's paid for. That's a different funding source, but some definitely come out of general fund. So I will circle back and get that more detailed information to you all.
Okay, thank you. And follow-up question, is there any, new Lindsay would have a spreadsheet, thank you.
So Lindsay, but so wait, let me just clarify, Tatiana, because that is the spreadsheet. I'm sure the one that Lindsay is showing you is one I just referenced, but just know that it's one specific budget code is not going to include, that's unrestricted general fund, it's not including all of the other ways that we pay for that. So I have to still add to what Lindsay is sharing with you.
Understood, thank you. And is there any conversation happening anywhere about ways to cut down like the amount of money spent on private placements and comp ed, about how to avoid spending that money by providing supports and services that would reduce the need for things like that. Are there any conversations like that going on at the district level?
Short answer is yes. Some of the ways that we want to address that is one, by making sure we have clarity and process and procedures, making sure that when we put something in an IEP that we do what the IEP says, making sure that we meet deadlines and IEP meeting dates, et cetera, because some of the fees that we pay out are simple, like you messed up or you weren't in compliance, et cetera. So there's a little bit of it around that piece, is making sure we have organizational clarity and making sure there's good trainings, et cetera. So yes, those conversations are happening. They're not happening though in this larger conversation towards that 7.1. And I know that feels weird. And that's only because, again, that 7.1 is really focused on the unrestricted general funds. But we do know and think that if we do better on the compliance piece, but also the prevention and early support, early intervention piece of it, we can offset and address some of those fees down the road. Another thing that we've been talking about, I'm going to give Lindsay and team a preview, is that, when we looked at our legal fees, both in terms of consultation and in settlements, it's a significant number just with that one funding, that budget source that I just talked, budget code that I just talked about. And we are thinking about and talking about how can having in-house general counsel, which is a cost upfront, but how might that in the long run really help us reduce some of these expenses? One, because there would be opportunity for easy consultation on things and, hey, don't do this, or hey, let me support you doing that. But two, because then we wouldn't have to reach out and pay these high fees to ask some of our legal consultants questions here or there. So yes, it's happening in different places in different ways, but I think that clarity piece is a big part of addressing some of what I think is the cost of
Sorry, I endorse that. Having dealt with F3 on numerous matters, I endorse that that path. And second, I will again offer my time and my expertise in how to revamp the broken SPED system in this district.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Dorrit, before you go, I just want to jump in and say, we have Anikia here, but this was the amount of time that you had for us. So we got through this tiny chunk of our agenda, but I still feel like we got so much information from you. So I don't know if you need to put a pause in it or if there are certain other things we've got that you want to try and address. And Dorrit's got her hand up too. So
I'm happy to take Dorrit's question or comment. And I do apologize for the short amount of time that I'm able to be with you all. I think one of the questions was about the May 8th date, and I have been spending a lot of time trying to get ready for that. So apologies, because I am going to have to get off so that I can continue to get ready for that. But again, I will, I promise you to make sure that staff, and I've already actually shared your questions with the ones that were here at, by Friday with staff, and we will definitely make sure to put some responses in that doc, and that responses will both be in the form of bullets or short answers, but also we'll give you links to presentations, et cetera. There was something about sustainability, like there's a lot that I'll give you too much. I'll give probably more than what you want, but hopefully it will be helpful to give you the response that I couldn't give you during this short time. Daniel
asked in the chat, there's a link file that is not accessible. Can this be made available? And I don't know, district, it's in the chat. So that's sort of another, we could try and put that maybe into the spreadsheet as well.
Okay, I think that's one of the links from the SBAC meeting. Yeah, we'll put that in there.
So my question has to do with what you just mentioned. I know you're going on the 8th to the Congress to testify. And I'm wondering, since you're trying to reduce these expenditures, are you willing to cut down on LES expenditures, which I had read, and you can correct me, please, that it was about $110,000 to pay for LES, Liberated Ethnic Studies curriculum teachers, to train the teachers. And you know that you're going to be questioned about that at the meeting. And would you be willing to say that, no, we won't be hiring these people again? Or are you discussing even cutting out that expenditure so that we can have less controversy in our school district that's caused huge unhappiness in the district? And you know, we don't need that kind of dissension in our district. So I was wondering about that. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. You all have to stay tuned for May 8th, Mr. Ritt. But what I will say is I want to clarify that the contract with Liberated Ethnic Studies is a contract that has been funded by a state grant. As you all might know, the ethnic studies is a graduation requirement, but it's also something that Berkeley community, many of you on this screen, I think probably all of you really value and understand the importance of and the research behind. And so I think there have been some misinformations about the partnership, including this idea that we're buying curriculum or taking curriculum. And though I won't go much into detail, what I will say to you is that that is not the case, that this is really still very much aligned to who BUSD is, and that the ethnic studies curriculum and the units, if you will, that are being developed by our Berkeley Unified educators to really make sure that the units and the lessons that are being created are really centered on Berkeley and the Berkeley experience, and highlighting folks that are in our community. The partnership with Liberated Ethnic Studies is really about them and their expertise kind of informing or supporting that effort. I'm not sure what you thought about it, but I want to just clarify, Mr. Ritt, that is not what I think I hear a lot of. I also want to say that as we move into this next budget season, as we prepare for 24-25, both looking at programs, we also shared with the committee, the different contracts that we have. And so we are always looking at how we are going to fund things that we value and that are important to us. And where there is no longer funding, we are going to have a conversation of if we want to continue that funding, but if so, then how? And so that is a collaborative conversation that we will have with the appropriate group. And I hope that you tune in to May. Honestly, I don't want you to tune in to May 8th. I would feel so nervous. I know if you guys were all watching, makes me feel even more pressure if you guys are all watching, but I do hope that on May 8th, you find that I represent the values of Berkeley Unified well, and that if you are already proud of me and the work that we're doing together, that when I return, that you will still be proud of me and the work that we're doing
I
together.
just want to make clear that I'm not against ethnic studies at all.
Oh,
I'm against the divisive aspect of it, not the ethnic studies.
Yes, and I think that everyone on this screen, Mr. Red, is not about what we don't want is a divided community. And I mean, that's our work, right? Is to make sure that we're able to be community across difference of opinions and ideas. So still work to do, but I appreciate you all. I will get Ms. Rita, I'm sending the answers to you. I'm actually just it's a Google Doc. I'm just gonna put the answers in the doc. Again, y'all, I'm a little crazy right now. I'm just telling you that. I got one eye with eyelashes, the other one don't have lashes. It's been a busy and intense time. But so if I don't get the answers in by tomorrow, please don't get upset. I will try my best to get it filled out again by the end of this week as a goal. Bye, you guys. Thank you for everything you do for our babies. I'll see you all later.
Loads of thank yous coming in for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rita, when is this? This is not the last meeting that you all are going to meet for the
No,
year.
Next month we have on the 20th, we've got an educational psychologist coming to talk to us about transitions from elementary to middle and middle to high school, and then a panel of parents who have gone through those transitions who will be talking a bit about that too. So that's our end of year.
Happy. Well, maybe I can come by and say goodbye and thank you, but I do hope I'm gonna put Vicky and Lindsay and even you on the spot, Rita, as members of SBAC. I do hope that a part of that agenda the next time is to give the committee an update on where we are with the budget, because we'll probably have more stuff to share.
Absolutely.
Thank you all. I only see like 7 faces or 5, but I thank you all for being here and thank you for your time. And I will see y'all soon. Bye.
Okay. So sorry that was such a whirlwind. Let's see. I think our next agenda item is just to sort of check in a bit here. I'm trying to pull our agenda up while we're talking. Oh my gosh, Di, you were able to take so many notes. That's so impressive. Yeah, and so our next agenda item on here is about making a statement to support our superintendent on later next month, I guess. And so is that something that we probably should have more of an open discussion about before we really jump into that, but
If I can ask, are people aware of what the superintendent's doing about her congressional hearing on May 8th? Is anyone here comfortable just kind of dive in a little deeper just to fill in the holes for people who aren't aware of this issue? Any volunteers? Nobody? Well, I put that point out in yeah, I just wanted to see if our council had any thoughts or any people's ideas, because as she is going through this congressional hearing, I can only imagine it's going to be very intimidating. This is about our school district, and wherever you lie on the issues, I feel she has been supportive of us as a PTA council, as parents, and just to let her know that we've got her back, whatever she does. Like, we have no idea what she's going to say, how she's going to do, but just a blanket statement: the PTA council supports our superintendent. She does good for us, talking about our BUSD values, and just standing behind her. I don't know if people have thoughts about that, comments.
Is the idea to like send the message to her or do what with the statement?
I think really it's to send it to her, to let her know we've got her back. Like, it's a public statement. There have been talks about there's going to be a rally somewhere on the 7th when she's speaking somewhere in the district, just to let her know that BUSD has her back.
Could we make a public statement at the school board meeting? Is there one tomorrow?
Yeah, there's one tomorrow. I mean, there are different forms we can do this, but us as a BPTA council, our folks here, again, support that or against it, have thoughts about that.
If you're open to my perspective, I think that there's plenty in PTA regulations and like kind of our mission statement, our value statement, and advocacy statements, even on a statewide level, that we could cobble something together about like inclusivity, anti-hate, and like in kind of on those themes that are already kind of vetted and approved through the state PTA into something that makes a lot of sense for our time right now. And, it is a scary thing. We have to think about our littles at Washington across from Civic Center Park and make sure that that our kids are safe during this time. So I think that the PTA in support of positive impact for students would be also, anti-hate.
Thanks, Lindsay. Any other comments? If not, we can just move on.
well, do we need to create the statement and then approve it through us somehow, or what is the next step there?
I think it is to put together a statement. We had talked about this. How do we get consensus or voting from our group here? And we could shoot it out through our email chain, see if we can get comment and see who we get comment from to make sure we get representation across our schools and our council.
Okay.
So maybe via email, just given the time frame.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's see here. So yes, school board meeting is tomorrow. And do we want to make a report out? Is that something, I mean, I don't know, can we get something together before tomorrow to have as a report out?
Probably not.
Okay.
You could combine your meeting minutes into a statement if you wanted to. That wouldn't require approval from the unit. It would just be reporting out on what happened the past few months at the PTA. If you want to use your 5 minutes, that's how we've done it in the past on our other committees. I just put them through ChatGPT, ask them to summarize for you, and then you can make it sound like real humans.
Well, I guess maybe you and I can talk about that at the end.
Okay.
Our next thing on our agenda is the treasurer's report with OFI, pink slipped, LCAP.
I have a
Yeah.
quick just recommendation. I mean, if you guys have the bandwidth to create a quick statement just saying that we support our superintendent, not necessarily whatever opinion she has in and then sent it to the president's group. I think we could get enough people to sort of give it a thumbs up by Wednesday night that you guys could just read that statement. I think that would make the most impact because people watch and go to the board meetings and those are recorded for prosperity. I don't know where else we're going to really put it that anyone might see it. So I think if we're going to do it, that would be the time to do it. I don't have the bandwidth to help, but I would definitely vote yes. In a statement just saying, we have your back kind of thing. I don't really know enough about what she's doing to have an opinion on it, other than I think she's doing a fine job for our district and I do support her. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Okay, well, like I said, maybe you and I can make a plan at the end tonight.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So, OFI pink slipped, LCAP budget, concerns for eliminating OFI positions, impacted families and BIPOC staff, some funded through SBAC.
This is the list that I asked her to talk about. The 14.2 is OFI staff, secretaries, like front desks, IAs. It's a huge list. I wasn't really expecting it.
So when are you guys expecting her to talk about it at the next XPAC meeting? Or
Next.
where does that fall?
It's on the agenda for Wednesday for the board to vote
Tomorrow.
on
Oh, okay.
tomorrow. No.
Is there an actual proposal on the agenda? Is because what we did at the last SBAC meeting is there were LCSF reserve funds and we approved in theory the release of those funds to cover some money that we were short, but we didn't talk about any specific positions. And the only time we talked about specific staff positions were lunch staff and secretary staff. And it was like a 3.2 FTE, and we did not recommend those cuts. So
Right, we voted no on that.
yeah,
cut.
we voted no on that. So this would be news to anyone on SBAC as well. And we do have an SBAC meeting on Wednesday prior to this, the school board meeting. I mean, so I'll know more then, but
It coming from other funds, so therefore it's not in SBAC's radar.
it could be that the idea is to move it out of general fund to pay for it somewhere else. Potentially, and the school board has to approve that, but I don't know. I haven't looked at the school board agenda. I don't know exactly what that item is. But I mean, Lindsay, you're on PAC, right? I mean, I assumed all of the stuff related to the LCSF and the PAC stuff and the LCAP monies was something you'd know about.
Well, that's the problem is that I know enough to question what they presented to us in SBAC. I don't understand any of those recommendations.
I see.
Because like they're only short like 150K or something from 1 year from the spending to the anticipated.
Uh-huh.
And then they have like almost 500K on that they want to transfer out. And then they said it's one time, but then in the beginning they said it was a more stable resource. So it's super duper confusing to me, like why they would make these recommendations, because we hadn't been talking about cutting EL supports. We did talk, this is a public meeting, but our comments are public too. We did talk about moving Avid out of the supplemental funds. So the fact that they wanted to continue to fund additional support for Avid, another 0.2 for that, would be the pack.
Okay,
I don't know if they would go for
I
that.
mean, you saw the you have the slide deck, right? From the last
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah, I looked at it this
So
morning.
the only thing we talked about it was on slide 26, where it talked about the OFI operating costs, the funding needed, the translation costs, the PK
Right,
literacy
like
support. Yeah,
15K, 10K, not much. The only
yeah.
big thing was the ELD.
Yeah, the
Um,
3 ELD teachers, which was the four,
Right.
yeah, which was 392.
So I just didn't understand like what the actual
Yeah, so I
funds they
had
were
no
talking
idea.
about. It's very, very confusing to me. And so I asked more questions. I did not vote because, the meeting went till like 6:20 and my time I had
Well,
expired
we didn't
after
talk
2
about it.
hours.
We didn't talk. I stayed to the very end of the meeting and we did not talk about anything but what was on that screen.
That's weird.
Yeah, it would be concerning. So there are 12 OFI staff.
Did you send a link to the board agenda?
It's up in I sent it earlier in the meeting.
Yeah.
Hold on, let me copy it and I'll bring it down again. There you go.
Yeah, it is confusing, Lindsay, because it's contrary to what Anikia said, right? They're not looking at positions right now. They're not, and so like I said, there are 12 OFI staff and it impacts so many families, and it would impact our most vulnerable families because that's where they get their resources and additional outreach. So that would be.
Well, I mean, like, yeah, it's
Oh, well, but it says resolution to eliminate reduced classified positions, final notice.
yeah.
So this isn't the positions that there are unfilled that they're getting rid of off the books, is it?
These are real positions.
I mean, we do have Ms. Shanosky, Director Shanosky with us. I don't know if
Maybe
she
she can help us.
is allowed to talk about what's on the board agenda.
All right, I guess silence is the answer. So I guess we'll wait 2 days
Yeah, that
and
would be
then
too
find
bad if a
out.
bunch of people go there to talk about this and it's not a real thing. Oh, wow.
It's a lot, right? It is
Yeah.
surprising to me, especially since we voted against cutting those front desk and lunchtime positions. They're cut to almost nothing or nothing.
Well, and I know that that's weird because I'm pretty sure the people that are listed for Malcolm X didn't get pink slips either in those positions. I feel like this has to be about moving money from one bucket to another, but I don't know that.
Can I ask a general question of the folks here? Is there buzz around the school's concerns of people getting cut?
I heard
Not-
a buzz about the ELD reduction, but then the SBAC explanation seemed to be the opposite. So I don't know what to think.
We had some minor buzz, like our site sub, is unclear whether or not she'll have a position. And there was talk of garden, but then after that garden presentation, we know our garden position is covered in theory. And I knew that our our other positions didn't get pink slips, so I wasn't worried about them. But that's just my site.
When we talked about garden, I loved that idea of like other sugar things getting taxed the way soda does, but I don't know if that's a universal
Yeah.
thought. That sounded awesome, but I don't know. Because for one of the points that came up was that there's a reduction in how much money we're getting from the soda tax because people are now drinking less soda. Yay! And oops. So how do we keep our funding while continuing to have people not drink as much soda? Maybe discourage them eating other sugars things.
Anything from Longfellow or Emerson?
I think, Lindsay, I think these are the FTE from the 13 FTE that we're removing from the books that are not filled positions. I think these are things that are encumbered, that are not filled, that we're eliminating from those 100 positions that we looked at.
Okay, that would be good. I mean, that's the most positive explanation.
That's the only thing I can think of. And just looking at these,
But aren't there more, there's only one, aren't there only like one or two OFI positions that are empty? And aren't there more OFI positions than that?
there are
on the-
no OP positions, but I don't see any on here.
I think there's two lists. There's options.
Okay, because the one I'm looking at has school campus aides, IAs, school service assistant, instructional assistant, storekeeper, school campus aide, clerical assistant, plant manager. There's no OP positions on the one I'm looking at, unless I'm looking at the wrong thing.
It's the family engagement and equity specialist at the district office. Is that the OFI?
Yes, that's what OP
It
is,
is?
yes.
Okay. So I see that on
Oh,
version.
I see layoff layoff one. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah, that's concerning.
Comment here from Nimota. Longfellow is trying to find funding for gardens since BUSD lost the grant to fund it.
Yeah, so we had a presentation about that. I don't remember what meeting that was in, but they're hoping that the Longfellow PTA can contribute like 10K to cover some of the garden budget. But he also applied for like a 200K grant, and if he gets that, they wouldn't necessarily need that funding. But he's trying to keep all his positions whole.
You know, when that was at SBAC last week, and
Okay.
when he was talking, one of the things I was thinking about was a while ago we had somebody present on chancellor grants from Cal,
Uh-huh.
and 10 grand is within the scope of what they would fund if there was a partnership that could be made between Cal, but I don't know how to reach out to him. So I don't know if that would be, again, it sounds like he's going for way bigger money than that. Do we want to review any of the items from our checklist, our spreadsheet that didn't get covered tonight, or do we want to wait until after we get responses?
I think we
Think
should wait
wait.
till we get responses.
Okay, that's fine with me too. We can carve out some time at the end of next meeting.
I guess we'll all be at the board meeting Wednesday.
I'm sending Natasha in my stead. I get to
Okay.
take I get to take it off.
That isn't a meeting I usually go to, but
No, I don't usually go either. Yeah, so I just asked an OP person and she said that they got layoff notices last month. So I guess maybe in order to give notices, they have to have a resolution.
We never got resolved from the superintendent about Prop 28.
no, I was thinking about that too.
Yeah. that's-
What kind of questions do you guys have?
It was about, none of our schools have direct direction, a specific direction, how the monies are going to come to our schools. You know, from last year, they were promised to reimburse the PTAs for positions. And so some people seem to have insight on how it's done and their principals know how, but we haven't gotten a consistent message from the district as to how they're going to distribute those funds, you know, from last year and then going forward. How can we use them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my principal seemed to think that we were gonna get a check in November if there was money owed back to us from the Prop 28.
Our
But that's, hearsay.
Yeah, our principal thought that even though we were using contracts, that he was told that we'd get reimbursed. Even though we haven't hired a staff position. Amy says, our principal went to Harvey. To get the money, and he said we had to go through Pete. She's still working on it. It's my understanding that we'll need to keep a lot more than that to keep the program. Oh, that's circling back around. That's for garden. Vicky, you're muted.
Yeah, so Rita's supposed to come up with some site funds in addition to the PTA funds, is what we were told at SBAC, if you weren't at that meeting, Namota. But yeah, everyone had that May 1st deadline, and so we wrote our check. And then the idea is that the check will get cashed and then we'll get reimbursed. So our thought is that we won't have to fundraise as much next year because we'll get the check from the district. But that's just the assumption we're going on.
What?
Do all the treasurers did everyone submit their check by May 1st? I know there was an email chain asking about how folks are doing it. Did everyone here, treasurers, submit that big check on May 1st?
We did.
Longfellow, yeah.
I haven't gotten an invoice yet at Washington, or like usually someone will send like this is the amount that they want. And I haven't got one yet.
Amy says her principal doesn't need it till May 10th, she said. Okay.
Sylvia Mendez did. Okay. Well, of our longer agenda, Di, do you have things that you want to prioritize making sure we talk about or check in on today? Or does anyone from the floor, I mean, anybody else want to chime in about other things they want to make sure we check in on? I know, let's see. The one thing that I wanted to make sure we bring up, since I know treasurers do come to this, is we haven't had a treasurers working group for a while. And I can't wrangle that. And so I didn't know if the treasurers that were here wanted to coordinate a bit around setting up a monthly meeting again. Because I know for a lot of people that was really valuable, especially in the fall when we have a lot of new treasurers starting. We also could use a new PTA council treasurer. If anyone is stepping out of their position and wants to step into that in the fall. It's coordinating a lot between sites and Peralta. Not a lot. That's the sort of component of it, that and hosting the meetings.
Yeah, both of my treasurers have very limited bandwidth. We have two co-treasurers because it's a lot of work. And I'm hoping they're gonna stay on for next year, but I don't know. They didn't really participate last time in the working group. I don't know that they will again next year unless we get somebody new. Which might lead to my question, not to overshadow this one, but in conjunction with this one, is what about elections? How are people doing on elections? I saw Willard sent out a message about a slate, and I think Longfellow I saw sent out a message. I'm working on one for our school to try to send out tonight to invite people to our next board meeting. But we don't have people in a lot of positions. We have a lot of fifth grade families graduating. We're kind of in poor shape. How are other people doing?
I heard, I'm an incoming Longfellow family. I heard, well, the Longfellow treasurer asked for fifth grade incoming families to take on the treasurer's position because they can't find anyone, right? And all three of their positions, right? Or many of the officers' positions are open at Longfellow, is what I heard.
And Namota would love you to go help her.
What is the situation over at Longfellow, Namota?
Well, we're voting we have secretary one. You guys can hear me. My bandwidth.
Namota, is everyone?
Funny.
I couldn't hear that.
What'd you say?
Did anyone else? Is that just me? I can't hear you. You're cutting in and out, Namota. No, you're muted.
If you want to type your response, we could read it out for you.
No problem. Maybe just if you can type in what you were thinking.
Amy Fire said, I would love meetings. I'm happy to launch a Zoom each month. That's awesome, Amy.
Yeah, Amy, maybe it's worth, I think Castle had talked about, maybe she can help coordinate timing, but maybe just sending an email around to the treasurer's working group list and seeing, like, just to find, I know Olivia was having them alternating at noon and at 8 on Thursday. What was it, the third Thursday of the month? But again, think about what works best for you since you're the one who's starting the Zoom. Or maybe, like I said, coordinate a couple times around. I don't feel like I did a great job of trying to coordinate that. But that might be something like that might be the next step.
Di, will you only be at Longfellow next year, or are you going to be at both?
I'm at Longfellow and Craigmont. Yes, with Lindsay.
A financial secretary and a secretary at Longfellow. Financial secretary is like co-lead with the treasurer, right?
They deposit the checks and the cash and help the treasurer out.
Okay. I don't think BAM has that as a position. We have a treasurer and a treasurer-elect.
I don't know if that's worth an email string to start, just people calling out, what are your open positions that you need for next year for people to start planning or thinking?
Although that seems more pertinent for Berkeley High and the middle schools, right? It's not like there's a way to look at rising kindergartners or TKers to try and harness the power of parents. And
Right.
although maybe we should have principals talk about it on the tour. Hey, here's a way to get involved.
Our
Welcome.
principal does.
That's awesome. Welcome. Have you considered being a treasurer for our PTA?
Yeah, Washington has, I think, all the positions open. And a very lukewarm, like people asking about it and then not following up.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think BAM just voted on theirs last time, but I could be wrong. Last week. I could be wrong. But I don't think they had open positions. They had a better than usual outcome.
It's interesting. We've had really large attendance, like 300 plus at a lot of our events. And we keep having people say that they want to volunteer, but not follow up. And like people will not sign up for stuff, but then they'll pitch in when they're there in person. But the commit rate has been really low.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that mirrors the experience at Washington too. Like Black Heritage Night, multicultural potluck, got multiple hundreds of people there. And I think at the last one, just last week, our parliamentarian went up on the stage and basically said, like, if people don't sign up, it doesn't happen. And we'll see if there's still crickets.
I did that at our last meeting as well.
It's not an easy jump to do.
And I've twisted some arms for some people to stay on for the third or fourth year in the same position, which we're not supposed to do. But next year's my last year too. So we really need to start recruiting new families.
Sylvia Mendez voted 2 weeks ago as well. Positions all are filled, but not assigned yet. I don't know what that means. Filled, but not assigned?
Hey, it's Kelly from Sylvia Mendez. We basically do a more co-op kind of style where without the pressure of like somebody's voting for president, somebody's voting for secretary or treasurer. People just sorry for my froggy voice. We solicit volunteers, much to the previous points of like, God, it's so hard to get people to show up for this stuff. But we solicit volunteers and then we kind of come up with a group of people who are willing to take it on, how many ever vacant positions will be coming up. And then later when things get going, we collectively decide who's going to take what.
Oh, interesting.
That's a really good idea. We should try to do something like that.
I think
What do you guys submit?
Sorry, Vicky, go ahead. Oh shoot, I lost her.
I was just gonna say, what do you guys submit to Peralta for your treasurer, secretary, and president?
Well, I think in this year's instance, our secretary and treasurer are not changing. Like those folks are staying, but our president is terming out. And so I don't know I think whoever agrees to take the president role on will just file that way. But I would have to find out for sure for you. But that's my understanding so far.
I mean, one of the things, so here at council level, like I noticed that often we don't have all schools represented. How would you guys feel about putting it in your bylaws that either there's a liaison to council or that the president or the treasurer or the secretary comes to council meetings?
And that's essentially what we're doing this year. I am the liaison for Silvio Mendez, but yeah, it's not in our
Thank you.
bylaws. I just showed up. Like I just started eavesdropping basically.
Perfect.
So
But like, what do you think of having it be in people's bylaws? Like having that be something that we try and get people to add to their bylaws? Because I think part of it is that there's this, like, I don't know, there's a link there that it would be nice to have. And again, like, I know it's one more meeting, but I think one of the reasons why we've been doing these sort of speaker series idea was to try and get more participation here. And it's worked a bit, but it's not like we have a big swell of people coming to these meetings either. Although I don't
really pushed this hard this week too. I was like, everybody show up.
I know,
And
same. Like
we
every
had a
parent
couple
we talk
people,
to,
but
like, hey, the superintendent's coming. Want to come listen?
I
Come
know.
come.
Well, it's funny, even the people who submitted the questions did not show up. They didn't want their answer. I don't know.
I mean, I think it's a great position to have on site-specific PTAs. I agree that it should be somehow entrenched in the bylaws, or some way to make it formal, even if it's not in the bylaws. But I feel like there is so much valuable information gleaned from these meetings that get past our structure. Works like I pass it along to Justin if he can't make it, but it also gets there via the meeting notes and agenda notes. So there's a couple of ways to do it, and we just have like a face-to-face download each time, and it's a nice way to do that. So food for thought.
Yeah.
It's in our bylaws that way as well. So while I'm the president again this year and next year, the last 2 years I wasn't, with the agreement that I would come to these meetings, and both the parents who were the previous two presidents were 5th grade, so they knew that they wouldn't have to do it 2 years in a row. So we kind of pre-planned that. But yeah, because it's a lot for somebody, especially someone new to the position, to do a whole nother meeting a month.
Yeah. And Lindsay, your comment about fundraising pressure versus community, the need to raise so much money puts a burden on people and they shy away from. You put a lot of effort a couple of years, was it last year or the year before, into changing the fundraising balance. And how do you feel, what do you feel is the outcome of, like, what was your takeaway on that? Or do you have one yet? Or is it still kind of to be determined?
It has to come from above. The superintendent has to make a policy that says that they're not going to accept FTE from the PTA anymore. Or she can make it so that she will accept FTE, but the PTA puts the money in the pot and the district decides where it goes based on how much money is in the pot. However she wants to do it, but she is the one who has to come up with that policy and then enforce it, because it is too hard on the site level to divide the idea of positions versus people. They are seen as one and the same, and the beloved XX teacher is always going to win over the common sense math of, well, do you think it's fair that 30% of our population donates, and so therefore we are literally asking them for $6,000 a piece in order to have a quote unquote equitable education? How's that equitable? How is that equity? And then you get a rep for like the people who put on fundraising events, but I don't know, Cragmont hasn't put on a lot of community events this year. The carnival was canceled, the game night was canceled. And what happens is they just peter out. They're on the calendar at one moment and then they just disappear.
Because of the conversations that we had before, I actually reached out to the principal at Ruth Actie to ask about, because you guys had told me about how they pay teachers to stay after school. It doesn't come from PTA money. Also, she says that's not the secret sauce. She says it's having a full-time RTI, it's having a full-time literacy coach. And this is the part that she was like, this is not attractive to families, but we don't have art. Like we incorporate art into our lessons, but our teaching time is our teaching time. And we don't have all of these other, programming that takes time away from literacy and math. And she's like, she said it, you know, this is not attractive to families, but she said, I think that's more about why we've closed that achievement gap than anything else. She also said that it's volunteer. Not all teachers stay after the hour. She said it's a volunteer thing. Some of them do, some of them don't.
Yeah, I heard through the grapevine that it's also the whole idea of a data informed instruction. So
Yeah.
for like the past, I don't know, at least 7 years, she's been collecting data, and the whole culture is around being responsive as fast as possible
Yep.
to any sort of red flag.
Yeah.
So catching them really early is a thing there.
Yeah. I asked her if she'd come here and talk, and she was like, no, thank you.
Well, based on the email chains about people fundraising, I haven't heard that anyone's budget has gone down. You know, people are still on that train of fundraising and meeting. You know, it was 1.4 million, a year ago, and early on in the season we had talked, and I think it was approaching 2 million. So I'm not hearing any budget slowing down and fundraising slowing down.
We've changed our fundraising efforts. We no longer do an auction or a raffle, which were extremely a lot of work. We didn't put on as many community events as we would have liked to. Like, we didn't have our family heritage night, but we had a fall and spring carnival. We had an inclusion day. We are having a pride event. We have several other we had a movie night, lots of community events, and the only two fundraisers we did this year is our MX fund and our readathon, and we were able to raise all the money we needed for our budget in those two fundraisers. I think we made over 100,000 in our MX fund at the beginning of the year, and then we made like 65,000 in our readathon, and then we had some carryover money. And we have reduced expenses. Yeah. So, and we tell our families that, we spend about $500 per student. So if every family it's a lot for a lot of our families, but if everyone contributes $500, that makes a $200K budget. And we kind of play it by ear. And we kept open the possibility of having a final fundraiser at the end of the year if we needed to, but we were able to reduce enough expenses, not spend money, and bring in more money than we thought, that we didn't have to have a third fundraiser. So we were very lucky this year. And then for next year, we're hoping that we'll get that reimbursed Prop 28 money, so that we'll only have to do the two fundraisers again and be able to offset our costs. But what's interesting is we wrote that check for $150,000. And even though a lot of those art positions are supposed to be covered, our principal already is like, oh, well, if something happens with gardening or something happens with the site secretary, he has this expectation. So my goal for next year is to set that expectation that we're going to give, 60,000 less if the arts money is coming in at $60,000, and that we're not going to give that much money, and be very clear that we can't fundraise that much every year. So we'll see what happens.
Do you feel like, so this is at BAM, the last I checked, we are spending 100 grand more than we've got coming in, but we always have an end of the year push with fundraising, so who knows? But when it comes to saying we're going to fundraise this much less, I know that's my personal preference, my sentiments around this stuff is this is it, we're having a hard time because getting people to fill these positions because of fundraising, in part.
I don't think ours is fundraising. Our problem's not fundraising, because
Right.
we had someone like we had a Valentine's Day event and we had a Pi Day event. Those are some of the other events. We have these big, huge community events, and it's just a lot of work. ordering food, you know, getting activities set up, having a performer or performance or whatever it is that we're doing. And really, we need event organizers for these small community events, and that's what we really need. We also have a lot of communications and a lot of tech stuff, you know, and finding the right tech person with the bandwidth, finding a good communications person. Right now, we have a really good fundraising chair that he does almost all of it himself, and that's what he does it for his work. So he just has people kind of help him with the small jobs, like for the readathon, like collecting stuff in the classrooms and stuff like that. But he does most of the lift for that, and he's a second grade parent, so they'll be lucky to have him a few more years. But it's, you know, it's the little jobs that we need people to do. But I think people are just so overtaxed, and there's just so much going on that it's just hard to commit to something regular.
Yeah, I think it's similar at Washington, and without passing judgment on anybody that I'll describe, I think there are people who don't want to do extra work, fine. There are also people who are willing to do extra work, but not anything that's PTA related, whether it's the event planning or the fundraising or communications or even, you know, talking with the teachers or stuff. But then they do volunteer in the classroom, for example, like they'll do the kindergarten reading, or they'll be out there in the mornings helping direct the drop-off traffic and stuff like that. So I see this like division where it does seem like overall the number of people who have the bandwidth is shrinking, but then on top of that, the way they want to spend their time, again, not going to judge these people, they're helping out in different places. They just don't want to deal with the PTA because sometimes there's also, you know, politics involved and just, you know, dealing with angry parents or you know, something they heard, or we have to deal with the principal, and even though our principal is great, it's like,
I think a lot of it is the scope of it too, like showing up and directing traffic 15 minutes or reading once a week for 15 minutes versus having a job where you're responsible for something for a whole year kind of thing, or planning an event. The stress level is very different for that. We also have a whole group of network people who do staff appreciation. They always show up for bake sales and bringing stuff for staff appreciation, or doing books and bagels and all of those things, but never like step up to do PTA stuff. I think it's just a bigger thing that people, it's too stressful for a lot of people, I think.
Oh, I miss books and bagels. My BAM doesn't do that anymore.
We forced them to institute it back. We like went and had a talk at our staff meeting on Wednesday and said, you know, if you do this, the will provide food for the parents after their 20 minutes in the classroom in the cafeteria, and we are using it as recruitment events.
Yeah, that would work well. We
and-
also used to have a coffee thing on Friday.
Yeah.
Mornings. We don't do that anymore either. but
Yeah,
that was
so the second half of the year we reinstituted it in like 3 grades. We did it back in kindergarten. We did Toasty Tales in first grade, and then the second grade had some like a book publishing party and an art show, and then we, after those events, sponsored like morning bagels for parents to come, and we used it as a recruiting event.
cool.
Okay, folks, we have 1 minute before 9 o'clock. Great discussion. Just want to honor everyone's time. We
And
had a couple
really-
of, go
really
ahead,
quick-
Rita.
Really quickly, there was the messaging that went around about basically getting people to school safely to the last 24 hours. Liza would be willing to work with folks from PTA to try and help more. It sounds like actually more working with the city and not BUSD. So I was going to message, you know, everybody on our list and try and include the folks that were on safety committees across schools and try and get, because this, I mean, that's sort of where this falls. Although rolling drop coordinators might be interested too.
If you have the name of the person from Malcolm X, his name is Gregory David or David Gregory, I forget which one. We've been talking about stuff with like 13 and it being a state road and traffic and stuff like that. And he's our safety facilities person, and he would be very interested, I think, and he also had looked at like a HVAC. We had a student pass out because it was so hot in some of our upper level rooms, and not recently, but a couple months ago when there was like a heat wave. And so he's been doing a lot of advocacy for us with that. So if you don't have his name on a list somewhere, email me and I'd love to connect him.
Okay. I'll probably send a general message, then a specific one trying to target safety folks.
Yep, that sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, maybe we can wrap up. We had, I don't know, some announcements. There's the dyslexia simulation event, April 30th at Sylvia Mendez. There's the Ethnic Studies Showcase, May 7th on a Tuesday night, 5 to 7 at Rosa Parks. Anything else to wrap up? Anyone else?
We hope to see you all on the 20th for our transitions conversation.
Okay. Well, great at seeing everyone. Have a good night.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Rita, you want to stay?